Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another episode here. Today we're going to be doing a really interesting topic. Last time we talked about In Defense Of and we introduced that new series, and I figured I wanted to actually continue on by doing another series, and I thought this one would really be interesting because instead of a series, or rather defending a series, we're going to be defending a character. So today's character we're going to be defending here is Sasuke Uchiha. The reason why I wanted to actually go with Sasuke Uchiha is obviously he's drawn up a lot of mixed opinions about him. Some people love him, some people hate him, and you know, throughout his journey in Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, you have quite a bit of questions towards his actions and what kind of decisions he makes. So, you know, I'm just going to be justifying every single thing by going through his whole life, and that's pretty much how In Defense Of works here. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's begin from the very beginning. We see Sasuke actually being born into the Uchiha family, a family that's already considered to be very talented, so a lot of high expectations are put on him already. But you also have to consider he's also born into the head family as well, where his dad Fugaku Uchiha is actually the head of the whole clan as well, so that puts even more pressure on him. To top that off, you also have his older brother Itachi Uchiha, where even among the Uchiha, Itachi was considered a genius. And because of that and all of his accomplishments, to be named an Anbu member at such a young age, to be considered a Chunin at 10 years old, you have a lot of expectations here put onto Sasuke's shoulders, and to think that he still didn't fall into this dark path, it says a lot. It means that Sasuke was actually quite a good-hearted person, to be honest, and so it makes you think, well, what turned him into what he was in Shippuden? So we see that obviously his father had a lot of expectations. He kept failing, and he had more expectations in Itachi, and with that comparison, I was honestly really surprised that Sasuke wasn't even remotely jealous. If anything, it was amazing that he loved his brother, he admired him, and yeah, I found that really wonderful about his character, particularly since this was a prequel, or rather, this was prior to the beginning of the original series. Now, this is where the things start to get a really bad turn. So obviously we know what happens. Itachi is ordered by the Leaf Elders to pretty much assassinate or massacre the entire Uchiha family and be branded as a villain. And you know, throughout this time it was also Itachi's goal to be portrayed as the villain to Sasuke as well, to foster his hatred so that one day Sasuke would take revenge and kill off Itachi, because Itachi obviously wanted someone from Uchiha blood to actually take vengeance for the clan. Now, of course, being the final survivor, we have Sasuke himself fostering this hatred and pretty much dedicating the rest of his life to just becoming strong enough to actually avenge his clan. Now, this is obviously where we get into the original series at the very beginning, where, you know, Sasuke starts off as this kind of cool emo kid character. You know, he has that cool design, but he has that emo look to him. I think a lot of people might actually like that, but you know, for some others, they might see that as that typical bratty kid who's kind of like acting all high and mighty. But knowing that he has his own past and what happened later on in the series, this is where we kind of get a bit of an understanding as to why his character is the way it is at the beginning of the actual series itself. Now, at the very beginning, when Team 7 was just formed, obviously you could see that Sasuke was already at the top of his class, and it makes sense. I mean, he had a real goal in hand, whereas every other kid was just trying to actually become a ninja for the fun of it, if anything, and they weren't really taking it seriously. So seeing that being the case, it's no wonder that Sasuke looked down a lot on Naruto, because Naruto obviously was more of a late bloomer than anything, and I kind of like that duality in their relationship. Alright, so getting into the series itself, where Team 7's now being formed and they're assigned to Kakashi. Kakashi makes them introduce themselves, and Sasuke actually mentions that he obviously wants to avenge his clan and kill a particular someone. That is pretty much the very hint at the beginning, knowing that it's also a reveal to what kind of person he actually is as well. He already has a certain goal in mind that is quite crazy, to be honest. I mean, for a 12-year-old, that is a pretty insane goal. So at this point of the story, I'm actually still on Sasuke's side. I kind of understand, but obviously this is given that we already know the knowledge of his past. Moving on into the story just a bit for a few episodes, we see that Kakashi's doing the bell test on Team 7, and we could see that Sasuke is clearly just a bit ahead of everyone, and that is the part where I felt like, you know, he was talking all high and mighty in the first episode, and yes, he couldn't actually take on Kakashi because we're trying to showcase that Kakashi was actually a Jonin, and seeing the difference between a Jonin and a Genin makes sense. But even so, you could also see the difference between Sasuke as opposed to Naruto and Sakura as well, and seeing that Sasuke is definitely far above anyone else in his year. Given that he was able to actually touch one of the bells that Kakashi had, made it more justifiable as to why he was acting so high and mighty. Everyone else was pretty much so beneath him, and we kind of also draw that parallel as well with the younger Kakashi, where at the very young age, I mean, Kakashi became a Chunin at 6 and he became a Jonin at 10. That's pretty insane, and you could see that Kakashi also had that similar personality, and with that comparison, it makes it justifiable for why Sasuke is the way he is at this moment. So I feel like anyone actually questioning him at this point is really taking it way too far. Onto the Land of Waves arc, we see that this one where they actually take on Zabuza, they need to demonstrate themselves. Now, as they're going along, they're attacked by the, I guess those two brothers, the Mist brothers, and in that case we get to see that Naruto actually was just completely scared. He was completely useless in that encounter, but you could see that Sasuke actually was very well composed, being able to actually take on two Chunin and, you know, do quite a bit of damage before Kakashi stepped in, of course. But seeing that, it again shows and justifies the high and mighty persona that Sasuke actually puts onto the other Genin. What I love about the whole Land of Waves arc is during the training session after the encounter with Zabuza, we could see that obviously Haku's power level and encountering someone like Zabuza himself kind of put a mark on both Naruto and Sasuke, and we could see that they both really wanted to train harder and see that relationship develop, and with that they kind of had an understanding with each other. I really like that, and also the training was pretty on a normal level as well. Sometime in the Land of Waves arc, we get to see that obviously when they're taking on Haku, Sasuke actually gets beat, and obviously we could see that his goals has become a bit more realistic now. He briefly mentions it to Naruto as a teaser, and same thing for us as well. It's kind of a teaser at that point, and I think a lot of people at that point kind of felt almost sad that Sasuke supposedly died in that battle against Haku, which unlocked Naruto's power. But, you know, when he came back, it was all great, we were all relieved. So let's keep moving on. Alright, so this part's the really crucial part now. We're in the Chunin exams, and with the Chunin exams, we obviously have them applying, and this is just really fun because at this point their relationship's kind of becoming a little bit better, where Sasuke kind of partially, I say partially because he hasn't fully acknowledged yet, but he has partially acknowledged Naruto for the fact that he could still do something decent of some sort, and also acknowledge Sakura for her ability to sense genjutsu as well, as we could see when they actually first went into the examination room. So that was definitely something that I felt was a bit of a small growth in Sasuke's character, where he didn't fully fall into that, I don't know, the wrong path just yet. We continue moving along the exam, where obviously in the first exam we see a bit of Sasuke actually demonstrating his abilities in deduction and figuring out that he needs to cheat to essentially pass the exam. But also we move on now to the final question, where he obviously also is tested by that courage as well, and seeing that after Naruto's speech he was kind of not feeling jealous yet, and he was kind of, if anything, acknowledging Naruto for his courage. I think that still puts a couple of plus points for his character as well. But moving on now, we're going on to the second stage, the Forest of Death. This is the part that really just changes everything. So at this point in time, we encounter Orochimaru. However, at this point, Orochimaru hasn't fully revealed himself. He pretty much disguised himself as a different shinobi, and at this point, Sasuke is just scared shitless. With this being said, Sasuke is definitely getting a reality check. I mean, compared to Zabuza where they actually had Kakashi, this was the Chunin exams, and they didn't have Kakashi to actually fight for them or anything like that. They were pretty much there on their own, and they had to do what they could. And seeing Sasuke actually break down, it's again another good point for him to grow. But of course, during that battle, we see that Orochimaru has bitten Sasuke and given him the curse mark. A little bit later down the exam, Orochimaru obviously leaves, and Sasuke is now unconscious alongside Naruto. Dosu and the whole Sound Ninja Genin are now attacking Sakura as well as Ino's team as well, and what we see is Sasuke actually awakening just in time to save them, and he pretty much dislocates really Zaku's arms, and they pretty much had to run away, the Sound Ninja. So we get to see a small portion of the corruptness of Sasuke. Now at this point, I want to actually bring this up because some people might not actually be fully aware of this because they probably wasn't paying attention to this in the show, but the curse mark does slightly deteriorate your brain or corrode your mental thinking, as mentioned by Sakon. So with that being said, that fully pure version of Sasuke might have been corrupted just slightly, which is definitely a small factor as to why he's going down that path. Now, of course, with proper control of the curse mark itself, one can actually avoid that kind of thing. The rest of them move on along the exam. I'm not really going to focus too much on that, but then we get to the third stage where we start to see another point at which Sasuke kind of changes a bit as well. So at this point in time, he's really reluctant to drop out under Sakura's guidance or advice, and so Sasuke ends up being in the first match where he's pretty much forced to rely on his taijutsu alone just to defeat that particular opponent, which I don't even remember the guy's name, so we're just gonna move on from there. Kakashi takes Sasuke in to seal the curse mark up. Sasuke obviously takes it in and apparently remembers the actual sealing that Kakashi actually did. Then he falls unconscious and Orochimaru comes by, where he claims to Kakashi that Sasuke will eventually get to him, and the way that Orochimaru is so confident about that goes to show how the curse mark might actually be a major factor into making Sasuke into what he is. The curse mark is pretty much just a power high where you pretty much get to experience this huge burst of power and you end up wanting to seek more of it. Not to mention, to properly control it, you're gonna have to be trained under the person that actually gave it to you, hence Orochimaru. Having that confidence, yeah, it kind of like makes sense. But at this point, Sasuke has no leanings towards going towards Orochimaru just yet. So everything happens along and we're moving on now to the second stage of the third stage of the Chunin exams, or rather part 2, where Sasuke is now paired up against Gaara. Now of course Kakashi informed Sasuke about this when he's inactive during that announcement, and so Sasuke leaves the hospital, goes seeking out for Kakashi, and he gets trained to use the Chidori as well as improve his taijutsu abilities, at least enough to the point where he's now comparable to Lee's taijutsu in the first stage, but just slightly below. We see that fight that Sasuke manages to actually harm or injure Gaara, which is definitely really cool of course, but later on we get to the Leaf Village attack or invasion by Orochimaru. We move on where Gaara is being pursued by Sasuke and Gaara goes out of control, pretty much defeating Sasuke. We get to see another reality grasp where Sasuke actually finds out that he's just not up to par here. He's unable to deal with Gaara at all, and we find that during that fight there where Sasuke was actually put out, Naruto was the one who actually had to save everyone and beat Gaara. And after that, it kind of, I think the first sign of jealousy in Sasuke, wouldn't really put it in the term jealousy, but more so a bit of envy for the fact that Naruto was capable of defeating Gaara in that moment while he couldn't actually do anything. But of course, at that point, Sasuke still doesn't really think too much of it. It's where we actually move on to the aftermath of the Leaf invasion, and this is where the things really get crazy. So at this point in time, Itachi and Kisame actually come into the village and they're hunting for Naruto. Sasuke eventually finds out that Kakashi's been knocked out by the Tsukuyomi, and now he's actually on search to Itachi as well, and eventually finds Itachi, where Itachi is just about to grab Naruto. So what happens is he goes in for an attack and he gets completely destroyed. There wasn't even a contest at all. It wasn't even considered a real fight. I mean, you could actually hear his inner thoughts as he's getting beat by Itachi. It's pretty hilarious, honestly, but he's just complaining about how after all this time, he's made no progress whatsoever into becoming closer to actually defeating Itachi. And again, that's a really huge reality check, and yeah, it's going to weigh down on him. But I think the one thing that really brings it on is this. The one thing that really brings it on to him is the fact that Itachi actually uses Tsukuyomi and breaks Sasuke's mind completely, and that just does it for him. We skip a lot forward on where Tsunade is actually now part of the village, and she goes and heals Sasuke up again. Sasuke is no longer conscious. We're gonna ignore that whole filler part. It's kind of ridiculous, to be honest, but during that part when Sasuke wakes up, that reality check, or the last thing that happened to him, which was being put unconscious by Itachi and seeing that he was just far too weak under the guidance of Kakashi, Sasuke gets pissed off. He wants to take on Naruto to reaffirm his abilities and just to see where he's at. And to be honest, I could totally see that. After losing to Itachi, after seeing that you couldn't even beat Gaara and Naruto was able to beat Gaara, Sasuke really was kind of feeling a bit down here, and he needed to reaffirm himself to know that he was still stronger than Naruto. So naturally he had to challenge Naruto, and I think this was actually a pretty reasonable outburst. I don't think this was too crazy at all. We move on to the actual fight itself. Of course, it gets broken up. Kakashi breaks up that fight, and Sasuke again gets to see another good glimpse. He at first actually smirks a bit because his Chidori manages to pierce in a huge hole into the water tank, and he sees that there's a little bit coming from Naruto's Rasengan attack. Only after, when he's about to leave, does he see the backside of that water tank where there's a huge amount of water pouring out, and there's a huge hole from the effect of the Rasengan actually dealing that kind of damage. So that's just more so a natural cause here, because obviously Sasuke has the Chidori, which is more so a precision attack, whereas the Rasengan is more of a power attack, and they're two different types of jutsu, so using it as a comparison was obviously not a really good idea on Sasuke's part. And again, we get to see this part is the part that really triggers Sasuke off. Kakashi gives Sasuke a talk, and Sasuke actually brings up the point, what if I actually kill off your family and everyone close to you, and let's see how you feel. Kakashi now brings up the point that all of his comrades are actually dead, and he's kind of in the same situation as Sasuke, which makes it pretty nice that they get that partial final bond before Sasuke actually ditches the village. But you know, you get to see some kind of understanding between the two. However, you also have to compare this as well. You're comparing an entire clan being wiped out as opposed to what Kakashi dealt with, which it is still sad, of course. Kakashi still lost his dad at a very young age. He still lost Obito and Rin, and then also his sensei. So that's going to be quite hard on him as well. But he went more so in the path of depression, whereas Sasuke went more to the path of vengeance. It's only at this point where the Sound 4 actually intervenes, because Orochimaru is now in search of a new body. The Sound 4 again defeats Sasuke, and that is just another moment that is really hitting Sasuke down hard. So at this point, Sasuke is now really questioning whether or not he should just ditch the village. I mean, at this point, it's really looking bad. I mean, you lose to Gaara, you lose to Itachi, your jutsu seems to not work as well against Naruto, and you just got beat by 4 random guys who are underlings of Orochimaru, who happen to have the same curse mark as you do as well, meaning you're not even special at this point. So how do you think that actually makes you feel? That's a huge letdown on how he feels about his power level, and at this point he really questions it and ends up ditching the village. Ditching the village at this point is the one really questionable thing, but again, I understand it. The amount of times he's being defeated and he's just not making progress, you need to take a new step, and that's kind of the same thing as us here in real life as well. Sometimes you just need to step over people, you have to partially walk into the darker side of things to actually accomplish your goals. And seeing that Sasuke is deciding to ditch and go to Orochimaru, I'm still okay with that. But that pretty much sums it up for the first part of this in defense of Sasuke. I'm now going to move on to part 2, which will be in a next video, so stay tuned for that. In part 2 of that video, there's definitely going to be the first really major questionable thing that I'm going to bring up. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys still like this, then definitely leave a thumbs up and tell me if there's anything you want to hear more of. Otherwise, share this video for anyone who might be interested in this, and also subscribe so that you know when part 2 will actually come up. But that being said, I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time.